My name's Logan, and I've been a long-haul trucker for over 15 years now. I'm based out of Denver, Colorado, but I spend more time on the road than at home. It's a lonely job, sure, but I enjoy the solitude. That all changed one night, though, when something happened that I can't shake, even months later. It was during a run through Texas, just outside Amarillo. I'd been driving all day and needed a break. It was late, well past midnight, when I pulled into an isolated rest area off the highway. You know the type, one of those quiet stops you see on long stretches of road, surrounded by nothing but open land. The place was practically empty, save for one other truck parked a few spaces away from mine. As I got out to stretch my legs, I noticed the other driver in the truck next to me. He was sitting behind the wheel, staring straight ahead. His face was blank, eyes wide open, not blinking, not moving, just staring into space. I nodded at him, trying to be friendly, but he didn't respond. He didn't even look my way. Something about him felt off. Maybe it was exhaustion playing tricks on me, I thought. So, I brushed it off and climbed back into my truck. But that image of his blank stare stuck with me. I closed the door, locked it, and settled into my sleeper, hoping for a few hours of shut-eye. I was tired, but I couldn't stop thinking about the guy next to me. His hollow eyes, his stiff posture, it was weird. But I had to sleep. I figured he was just another exhausted driver like me. Then, in the middle of the night, I woke up to a soft tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. My heart skipped a beat. It was coming from the window of my cab. I checked the clock, 3:17 a.m. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, but the tapping continued, steady and deliberate. I pulled back the curtain just enough to peek out, expecting to see someone. But there was no one there. That's when I noticed something even stranger. The truck next to mine, the one with the creepy driver, was empty. The driver's door was wide open, swinging in the breeze. My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard him leave, and there was no sign of movement in the dark parking lot. The entire place was dead silent, and that open door felt like a bad omen. I knew right then that I needed to get out of there. Something wasn't right. I jumped into the driver's seat, fired up the engine, and took off without looking back. My mind raced as I sped down the highway, putting as much distance as I could between me and that rest stop. I didn't stop until I reached a crowded truck stop near Lubbock, surrounded by lights and people. A few days later, I heard the news. Truckers had been found dead along that same highway. They'd been killed in their sleep, their doors locked from the outside. The driver from that rest stop was one of them. They found him inside his truck, strangled to death, with no signs of forced entry. Whoever did it locked him inside afterward. That news hit me hard. I couldn't help but think about how close I'd come to being one of those victims. If I hadn't left when I did, I might have never woken up. The thought still haunts me. These days, I'm more cautious. I avoid isolated rest areas whenever I can, and I always keep my doors locked and a weapon close by. But that night outside Amarillo, it changed the way I look at the road. There's a dark side out there, lurking in the shadows, and sometimes the only thing keeping you safe is luck. And I'm not sure how long that luck will last. My name's Sam, and I've been a truck driver for over a decade now. I live in Spokane, Washington, but my routes take me all over the country. I've seen my share of strange things out on the road, but nothing compares to what happened on that cold, rainy night in Montana. It still sends shivers down my spine just thinking about it. I was on a late-night haul, passing through Montana on my way to North Dakota. The weather was terrible. Rain pouring down, making it hard to see the road ahead. I was about 30 miles outside Billings when I saw him. A young guy, maybe mid-20s, standing by the side of the highway, drenched to the bone. I'm not one to pick up hitchhikers, but something about the rain and the darkness made me feel bad for him. I pulled over. He climbed in without saying much, just nodded when I asked him if he needed a lift. His clothes were soaked, and he kept his hood up, hiding most of his face. I introduced myself, trying to make conversation, but he didn't offer much in return, just a name. Kyle, and a quiet thanks. The whole thing felt off, but I told myself he was probably just cold and tired. We drove for hours in silence, the rain pounding on the windshield, the wipers working overtime. Every now and then, I glanced over at him, but he just stared out the window, lost in his own world. Something about his presence made my skin crawl. But I kept telling myself it was just the weather, the fatigue. After all, it was just a kid who needed a ride, right? Around 2 a.m., I decided to stop at a small diner just off the highway for some coffee. I asked Kyle if he wanted to come in, but he shook his head. "I'll wait here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think much of it, so I headed inside, grabbed a quick bite, and took a few minutes to warm up. When I got back to my truck, though the passenger seat was empty, Kyle was gone. At first, I thought maybe he'd just gotten tired of waiting and decided to take off on foot. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A note, sitting right on the seat where he'd been. It was written in jagged, curried letters, "You're next." My heart started racing. I looked around, but the parking lot was empty, and there was no sign of Kyle anywhere. The rain was still coming down hard, and I could barely see beyond the truck stoplights. A sinking feeling settled in my gut as I sat there, staring at that note. I didn't know what to do, but I had to keep moving, so I tossed the note onto the floor and got back on the road. The whole drive after that was a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about those words. "You're next." Who the hell was this guy? What did he mean by that? The next morning, as I was nearing the North Dakota border, I turned on the radio and caught a news report. A dangerous inmate had escaped from a nearby prison the night before, somewhere just outside Billings. He was a convicted serial killer known for leaving notes before killing his victims. My stomach twisted when they mentioned his name, Kyle, the same name the hitchhiker had given me. I immediately pulled over and called the police. They asked me a bunch of questions, took down all the details, but in the end, they never found him. No trace of the hitchhiker, no sightings, nothing. It was like he vanished into thin air. For weeks after that, I couldn't sleep right. Every sound in the night made me jump. Every shadow looked like someone lurking in the dark. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Kyle to come back and finish what he'd started. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there somewhere, watching. And every time I get into my truck, I look over at the passenger seat, half expecting to see another note. My name's Liam, and I've been hauling freight between Nevada and California for years now. I live in Sacramento, but most of my time is spent on the road. My driving partner, Doug, and I had been through all kinds of situations together. Nothing ever really shook us until that night in Reno. We were passing through Reno on a typical route when we decided to stop at a truck stop for the night. It was late, and we were both wiped out. We parked the truck, locked up, and called it a night. I remember falling asleep fast, the kind of deep sleep you only get after hours of driving. But when I woke up the next morning, Doug was gone. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he went to grab some coffee or stretch his legs. But his phone was still on the dashboard, and all his stuff was in the truck. No sign of a struggle, no noise in the night, just gone. I searched the truck stop and the nearby area, calling his name, but Doug was nowhere. After hours of searching, I called the police and reported him missing. Weeks passed with nothing. No clues, no answers. Then, I got the call I'd been dreading. They found Doug's body in the desert, miles away from the truck stop. His throat had been slit. The police reviewed the surveillance footage. It showed Doug walking off with someone, but but the footage was too grainy to make out who. I can't stop thinking about how I was just a few feet away when it happened. If only I'd woken up. I'll never forget that guilt. It haunts me every day.